Hello, I'm Charlie Worsham, your host for Mississippi on the Map, a podcast brought to you by Visit Mississippi. This podcast explores why Mississippi is the birthplace of America's music. Here we are, Mississippi on the Map, my first own location. I'm actually on the Mississippi map with Country Music Hall of Famer, member of the Grand Ole Opry, and his better half, y'all, Connie Smith. Leader of the fabulous Superlatives. I could go on and on. Our founder of the Congress of Country Music, the great Marty Stuart.
And here I sit with CMA Instrumentalist of the Year, Mr. Charlie, one of my favorite people in the world. Welcome to Philadelphia.
Thank you, Marty. I drove in last night and those pine trees, man, I knew I was home.
Let me ask you a question. When you come from Nashville or anywhere and you cross the state line and those pine trees start whizzing by your windshield, do your shoulders start coming down? And is there a peace that settles in on you?
There absolutely is. I crack the windows. I get a deeper breath in my lungs of that air. And I don't know what it is, but there is truly a quality to the air.
That's right.
When I get home. And it does. It relaxes me. If I could bottle it up and bring it with me all around the world, I'd probably be less stressed all the time.
I hear you, man. But there's nothing like home, right?
Nothing like home.
Yep.
And speaking of home, the first question I wanted to ask you, because the whole scope of this podcast is to explore the reasons why Mississippi is the birthplace of America's music. And here we are in Philadelphia, where you grew up, where one of the new stars on the horizon of country, Hardy, grew up. Stone's throw from where the father of country music spent his formative years. Do you have an earliest memory of making that connection between where you were growing up and being plugged into a powerful community and wellspring of creativity?
It was the radio station, WHOC in this town. 1490 on your radio dial. 1,000 watts of pure AM pleasure, right? There was a visionary named Mr. Howard Cole, who I think went on the air in 48 or 49. And when I was falling in love with music, which was really early on, what I understood about my radio station in my hometown is it signed on with country music. There was Farm Report, who was in the hospital, who was in the funeral home.
Yeah.
Country music in the morning. It was an hour of Southern gospel in the afternoon, from the noon hour. And then afternoon was rock and roll, top 40. Late afternoon was soul. And they went into the dusk hours with easy listening or classical, and then they signed off and got up and did it again the next day. Well, I thought everybody's radio station did that. And I was like a sponge, and it just got all inside of my bones. But it wasn't long after that I realized that so much of what I was hearing came from, the northeast, southwest of Mississippi. I thought, this is pretty important.
Yeah.
This is pretty important.
Yeah. I know the television was also a window into a bigger world
Absolutely.
for you.
Absolutely. Well, my dad was a factory guy. Of all of those musics that I listened to on WHOC, it was country music that got my heart.
Yeah.
The rest of it got my mind and my feet, but country music got my heart because those 3-minute country songs and those troubadours that sang them and the words inside of those songs, I could look out the window or think about some family member or buddy of mine, and those songs came to life, like 3D. And my dad, the factory guy, we shared a love for country music. And so Saturday afternoons, so many of those Grand Ole Opry stars had 30-minute syndicated shows that they aired down in this region. Porter Wagoner, Wilburn Brothers, Del Reeves, Flatt and Scruggs, Johnny Cash later on. But a lot of those kind of characters. And Daddy and I would sit as close as I could to Daddy and we'd watch those shows. And it brought the radio to life in a different way because I heard those songs with my eyes then. Yeah.
Man. So, the Congress of Country Music. Why do we need it? And why Philadelphia, Mississippi? And why now? I kind of think I know the answer already, but the people need to know.
I've asked that question over and over and over again along the way. This project has been working for 10 or 12 years now. I've lost count. To begin with, I had a collection of about 20,000 crown jewel artifacts of country music treasures, deep into the pool, Smithsonian level treasures.
Oh, yeah.
Had no idea in my life what I was going to do with them. Maybe 10 years ago, something like that, B.B. King called me, and I knew about his place over in the Delta.
Yeah.
And he said, I come down, a couple of days a year, and we play music and we raise funds and awareness for my place. Would you come and bring your band and play? I said, of course I would.
Yeah.
So I went over and spent the day with BB. And at the end of the day, he patted the seat. Come here, brother, let's talk. And he says, here's what's going on in our state. He said, I've got this place going. He said, I think the Grammys is going to put a place in on Delta State campus.
Yeah.
Mr. Presley's place is what he said.
Yeah.
Is over in Tupelo. There's your rock and roll place. He says country music needs a spot. You ought to think about that. And I was like that scene in the Blues Brothers, I got a sign, on a mission from God. On the way out of Indianola that night, it started coming to me. I thought, man, Philadelphia, that's like setting a spaceship down, but I'll do it.
Yeah.
And that's why I started it. So BB was right. It's in the birthplace of America's music, 35 miles away from the father of country music's ground in my hometown, Train Town.
Yeah.
A town that had deep roots with country music due to the Neshoba County Fair and the Choctaw Fair. A lot of lineage there. I thought, well, stranger things have happened. Just start seeing what happens.
And you can tell the story beyond just the county line here in Neshoba County. But, you know, I think about Tammy, Wynette, and the great Charlie Pride from different corners of this state, Conway, Twitty. But there is a big country music story here.
Well, the thing that I love about the country music story, and you are a perfect example, and you mentioned Hardy, and there's more. You know, one of the first things I did was I went to Haley Barbour, who was the governor at the time, and I asked, and Phil Bryant was the lieutenant governor about to run for governor. I said, okay, so we have a blues trail. Can we have a country music trail?
Yes.
And Phil adopted that, and he took it to Haley, and everybody went, yeah. So, but one of the things that I love about the country music trail is that it's not just all friendly ghosts. There's a lot of new people. There's Charlie Worsham. There's Faith Hill. There's
LeAnn
Hardy.
Rhymes.
LeAnn Rhymes. I mean, keep going.
Well, now I will say, and he's been around a while, but he's still around. Because you were just in Leaf, Mississippi, putting one up for Lloyd Green.
Who is,
that's right. I feel like a keystone in the sound of Charlie Pride.
That's right. He was, as Connie calls it, the steel guitar was my dancing partner.
Yeah.
He and Charlie were a dangerous little team in that recording studio. But the point being, Mississippi, it just keeps coming.
Yeah.
And it's not just about what happened here.
Yeah.
But we keep producing relevant and integrity-based artists.
Yes, people on the cover, but people in those little fine print liner notes too. Yeah, which to me is about as important or more than the cover. Goodness. Well, amongst those artifacts, you mentioned your incredible collection. I believe it started with Patsy Cline's traveling case at a pawn shop on Charlotte in Nashville. Maybe that's the legend I heard. But you have this historic collection. You've just blessed the Country Music Hall of Fame with it. Out of all those artifacts. And speak a little bit about that journey, that decades-long journey. But which treasures come to mind as the most Mississippi?
Well, I'll tell you, the very, very first thing was Minnie Pearl's autograph.
Okay.
And I'll tell you the story. Minnie Pearl had been booked by, I think the fellow was Jimmie Swan, who was running for governor back in the early 60s. And they would do a thing. They had a little wagon that they pulled, and they'd pop it up, and they'd go from courthouse to courthouse. And Minnie Pearl would do her bit, and a band would play, and then they'd introduce Jimmie Swan. He'd come up and make his speech, and they'd off to the next town. So they stopped in Philadelphia, right over here.
Yeah.
And across the street from where they did their thing in front of the courthouse was a little bank where my mom worked, the Bank of Philadelphia. And Minnie came in there to get some change, and my mom recognized her. And she asked Minnie if she'd sign an autograph for me.
Okay. On
a piece of bank paper. And I still have that.
Yeah.
So that lit the whole fuse. And when acts would come through this town, I'd get autographed records, ask a guitar player for your pick.
Yep.
Can I tote your guitar from the bus to the stage? Anything to be a part of that world that I wanted to be a part of. And that was my world.
Yeah.
That was my world.
I had a little version of that growing up that you're a part of when you came to Grenada and played. Got rained out. Y'all had to leave so quick not to get the bus stuck in the mud that left that bus mat. And I've actually just told the story on a whole nother podcast about how I woke up every morning until I left Mississippi into the bigger world, and that's the first thing my feet hit on the floor. And I now have Roy Acuff's last tube of Poly Grip, and I got a couple others. I got a guitar strap of Chet Atkins that came through Tom T. Hall's wife. Dixie Hall was the one who got it off him, and I'm gonna compare notes later on that. But I know one of those treasures you have is Pop Staples' Rosewood Telecaster, which is a huge piece of Mississippi story.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are other Mississippi artifacts in that collection.
Yeah. Well, before we get into that, you notice there's security guards up there that don't want you to take this rug.
I'm not going to take it, I promise. I won't take nothing today, you know.
Well, Philadelphia, every town has its story, good, bad, and indifferent. I don't care what town you live in. There are things that you would just assume had never happened and hope never happens again. In 1964, it's a very famous story. The 3 civil rights workers were killed.
Yeah.
In Philadelphia, unjustly.
Yeah.
And the town, just came down under the scrutiny of the world at that moment. Everything that I ever knew and loved in this town went upside down. But We Shall Overcome was a song, if you remember, that you see on historic films these days. That was, as an anthem. But there was another song. It was called Uncloudy Day by the Staple Singers. And it was played around this town. You could hear it coming out of people's screen doors. It was played on the radio. People were singing Uncloudy Day by the Staples. I didn't know who was singing it, but I've said many times it was so eerie. It sounded like ghosts singing in a cotton field.
Yeah.
And Pop Staples' guitar was such a great part of that family sound. And Pops used that guitar as an instrument of light.
Yeah.
To tell the truth and to try to bring people together and to honor people. And it was given to me after he was like family to me. Mavis and Yvonne, his daughters, gave it to me after Pops passed away. And there's a responsibility that goes with that guitar. And you played it.
I was
at the
so
Country
lucky
Music
to play
Hall
it
of
that
Fame.
day. Yes. And it is a
Chapel
powerful.
Heart was so good. That's another group of people
Chapel Heart, that's right.
from these Mississippi world. But yeah, you did a great job playing Pop's guitar that day.
Thank you. I tried to get the shake right.
Well,
on
you
the
got
amp.
it just right.
It was right here in the Mississippi Delta where more than 100 years ago, black sharecroppers and laborers gave America its own musical identity. Drawing on the sounds and traditions of their native Africa and the struggle of their American experience, the blues was born. This land was the epicenter of musical creativity, offering Saturday night liberation and salvation on Sunday morning. The sounds of Mississippi gave rise to gospel, gave country music its twang, gave R&B its soul, jazz its blue note, and rock and roll its king. If you love music, there's no better place to discover its roots and its future than in Mississippi, the birthplace of America's music.
I tell you, I think about that guitar, and I think about your mandolin is also an instrument of light. And you've done a lot with it. Soul's Chapel, I feel like, was very inspired by, I know it's not a mandolin heavy record. I mean, that's Pop Staples' guitar on that record of yours. And I think about at your Hall of Fame induction, Connie Smith inducted you, and she mentioned Mississippian Will D. Campbell, whose words were instruments of light, who also made moonshine with Tom T. Hall on the side, but would preach to everybody. And part of his reason for preaching to everybody was that he believed in reconciliation. And Connie talked about Will Campbell at your induction and talked about how he was a reconciler and you are a reconciler. And is there anything about being a Mississippian that you feel makes one particularly suited for reconciliation?
Well, I think I used to have a manager named Mark DeTore. He also managed that singer Kathy Mattea, who was from West Virginia. And Mark used to kid me, and he would say that I represent 2 artists, one from Mississippi and one from West Virginia, who usually have to fight for last place with their states everywhere they go.
Yeah.
And Dr. Robert Kayat used to say that Mississippi's always on the top of the wrong list and the bottom of the right ones. And if you're from Mississippi, we all know better. And I love, one of my favorite things in this world is to have people come here for the first time that think they know what the press has taught them, what the stories they've heard, the movies they've seen, and when they come down here and they find out how genuine and wonderful the people are, they leave here, there was life before you came to Mississippi and life after, in a good way.
Yes.
And I think Mississippi people have had to put the best foot forward in the worst of times, under the worst of headlines, so many times, knowing that was just a loud pocket of people over here that live that way. Not everybody down here by any means, thinks that way. And so reconciliation, another word for that is just love, just loving people. I love people.
Yeah.
I love people. And that comes from my mama. She taught me to love people.
Yeah. Man, that is so true, Marty. I've never heard that so well put, but it's true. I felt that as a young Mississippian going out into the world. It was Boston, Massachusetts for a couple years, and then Nashville, and then getting in the van with the band and going everywhere. And now that everywhere is included the UK and Europe and Australia and other parts of the world. And I can see it in people's eyes when they ask me where I'm from, because I still say Mississippi. Mm-hmm. I've been in Nashville almost 20 years. I still say I'm from Mississippi. And you see that initial cloudy weather pass over their eyes, but then you get to tell them your truth, about where you're from, and in doing so, it clears up those clouds, and we have to have a lot of practice. Any Mississippian who steps outside, north of Memphis or west of the river or into Alabama, you do have to practice that. That's a hard thing.
Well, you live that way. I've always known you. You're one of the good guys. You're known as one of the good guys, and you carry it with you everywhere you go. And when I came down here and with big ideas about Congress of Country Music and all that stuff, the landmines to me were intertribal, meaning I wasn't affiliated with any particular school. I wasn't affiliated with anybody's particular church, or I wasn't on one side or the other of any political lines. I just saw it as I'm coming down here. And some guy told me, he said, that ain't the way it is. I went, I know that ain't the way it is, but that's the way I'm going to treat it. Yeah. I'm just going to love everybody. And if we're at the bottom of all the lists in the world, why don't we just, at this pasture in the bottom of the United States that we all know is precious ground, why don't we just love everybody and welcome them?
Yeah.
And that's the way I live. I thought we're Mississippians, and that covers it all for me. Yeah. That covers the whole deal for me.
Amen. Because we're also pretty high up on some lists, like how many Grammy winners per capita and things like that. And I speak with Paul Kingsbury in my work, one of the historians at the Country Music Hall of Fame, who was there that day,
right.
Celebrating your gift to the museum. And I think we counted 9 members of the Country Music Hall of Fame from Mississippi and counting.
Well, that's the one thing when it comes to marketing your state. When you get around to that part of the creative legacy of Mississippi, not just music, but the written word, Faulkner.
Yes.
Television.
I mean, Marty, you did a TV show. I mean, I think about Oprah Winfrey and movies with Morgan Freeman. And
when you get around to the creative legacy, not many places on planet Earth can keep up with what has come and continues to come out of the state.
That's right.
And that's, on the world stage, a mighty thing to behold.
Amen. So I want to talk about one of my favorites, your album, The Pilgrim.
Yeah.
Which to me represents a watershed moment in your career. And for someone listening to that record who may not know, where do you most hear Mississippi in those songs and recordings? And before you answer, I will say I was listening to it on my drive in yesterday, and it does start with a train. So that starts out pretty Mississippi. But tell me more about what's Mississippi in the threads of that record.
The most Mississippi part of that record is the guy that made it and the story. Mm-hmm. It was a little bit of a variation on a story that really happened in Philadelphia here. Mm-hmm. I was at dinner one night, and in Los Angeles, and there was some tragic domestic thing that had happened between a husband and a wife. And at the end of whoever was telling the story, it was on the news, it was on everybody's mind at that moment. I said, well, that reminds me of a story that happened in my hometown. And I'd been looking for a new record to do something that was really different, and just had one record left, and I wanted to go out smiling on my record contract with MCA, something legitimate. And the more I told the story, the more it felt like it was important. It was happening in the 60s here. But that night I was in bed, and the songs and the idea and the concept just kept pouring out of the sky. Yeah. And I swear to you, it was one of those things about 4 in the morning. God, if this is really you, give me a sign. And I set my foot on the floor, and there was an earthquake.
Wow.
The only one I've ever experienced in my life. I went, got it, let's go to work.
Yeah.
But it was a story that happened pretty much here. I changed some things because some of the children are still alive, and I didn't want to completely drag them through it again. But there was enough story to tell that happened here in Philadelphia.
Yeah. Well, I think about the main refrain, the verse, if you will, to the theme. I am a lonesome pilgrim far from home, and oh, what a journey I have known. And I was listening yesterday, and I thought, man, you could just replace pilgrim with Mississippian, and it makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's a pretty Mississippi story. Now, I had Ketch Secor on this show a little while back.
Catchings?
Yes. And Ketch told me this great story about coming down to Oxford, Mississippi to kick off a tour with the Waffle House folks, with you, with Connie Smith, Merle Haggard. And I guess the big press event was in the backyard of Roanoke, William Faulkner's home. And I guess a baseball game broke out that day in William Faulkner's backyard, which is such a Mississippi thing. But I started doing the math. You're a part of Livin', Lovin', Losing, Livin', Lovin', Louvin', a record that's a tribute record to the Louvin brothers, produced by Mississippian Carl Jackson. Mm-hmm. It's one of my favorite records. And I love the song You Do on there, Let Us Travel On. I think with Del McCurry maybe.
That's right.
But another track on there is You've already put big old tears in my eyes, must you throw dirt in my face.
Was that Merle's?
That's Merle's.
Yeah.
And in the liner notes it says, recorded in a hotel room at the Holiday Inn in Oxford, Mississippi. And I thought to myself, I wonder if that's that same trip where he and Marty and Ketch and everybody was playing baseball in William Faulkner's backyard. And you may not know, but he may have recorded that vocal that
It's
that
likely
day.
Because we hung around Oxford for a couple of days because we did Merle and the Strangers, me and the Superlatives. I think Connie, we did a show at the Ford Center on Ole Miss campus, and the next day was the press conference. Yeah. So Merle was kind of a sitting duck for a couple of days, so Carl would have the answer to that in a heartbeat, but that's very likely that could have happened.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. That was a large Mississippi day because we were kicking off that tour. It was a press conference for a tour that I'd dreamed of called the Electric Barnyard Tour.
Yeah.
Old Crow and Merle and the Strangers, me and Connie, and Rhonda Vincent, maybe Eddie Stubbs was there. Waffle House was our sponsors.
Yeah.
On the lawn of William Faulkner's house, thanks to Chancellor Kayat. And the big moment for me was kind of the wrap-up, the musical wrap-up of the press conference. Was Merle and I were standing in the front yard singing a couple of Jimmie Rodgers songs.
Yeah.
And the sky was pitch black. And as soon as we finished and walked off, I mean, it turned loose. But it held off till we were finished singing those songs. It was big.
That sounds big. Man. So what does Marty Stuart today know about Mississippi that young Marty Stuart growing up here maybe didn't quite yet realize?
Well, honest to goodness, pretty much everything that I love about Mississippi was set inside of my heart by the time I left town when I was 12. I mean, the first 2 records I ever had was a Johnny Cash and a Flatt and Scruggs record. Mm-hmm. Only 2 jobs I've ever had was with Johnny Cash and Lester Flatt.
Right.
And the girl I loved came out here and played when I was 11 years old. I told Mom I'm going to marry. So, I mean, I went to Nashville pretty well settled in my mind as to where I come from and
Right.
whose son I was and how much I loved it. And I think the difference is now, and I just want to be the Pied Piper and lead everybody back down here and show them what I mean
Bring it back.
and where I come from and where you come from and
Yeah.
where so many of our compadres come from. And let them see what the shouting's about. Because the world, nothing's new under the sun, but the world has a lot of different dynamics these days. But there is a quality of life here, and it's the people more than anything, along with the geography, that is unparalleled in my mind. I mean, I love traveling. I love the West. I love different parts of the world, but there's something about this. And when you get up into the Delta, for instance, there ain't nothing there. It's like the Badlands. There ain't nothing there, but there's everything there.
Yeah.
If you listen close enough, you know it. You were raised
Yes.
up there. It touches your heart in ways that are unexplained,
Yeah.
but it's there, right?
It's there. That's right. All of it.
Every
Everything,
bit
every
of it.
part of it that's ever
Every
been
bit
is
of
still
it's there.
hanging around.
And that's what I enjoy seeing people come down here and just get charmed by
Yeah.
and touched by.
That's right. Goes without saying, anyone who makes a pilgrimage to Mississippi should visit the Congress of Country Music. But let's say they've already visited. What's the next destination in the state you want to send them to, and why?
Oxford. I don't care who you are. I don't care how traveled or cultured or country you are. There's something in Oxford that it's a one of a kind place, I think.
Yeah.
There's something for everybody up there. It's Old South, it's New South, it's then, it's now, it's tomorrow. It's the past, present, and future, and there's a deep tradition there, but man, there's a spark about Oxford, I think, that's just pretty incredible.
I have to agree. Thacker Mountain Radio, Faulkner.
The bookstore on the square.
Square Books is great.
Just the beauty of the campus,
Yeah.
the quality of the people. It's a smart society.
Yeah.
It is.
Young Jim Weatherly, I can picture him, you know, he'd go on, of course, to write Midnight Train to Georgia, but I think there's so much there. That's a great
John
answer.
Grisham.
John Grisham, that's right.
The Mannings, there's just
Willie Morris.
Yeah, man. I mean, on and on and on.
Yeah.
The things that have happened and been generated from that town.
Yeah. Well, Marty, thank you so much for being a part of this podcast.
Charlie Worsham,
I
my pleasure, and I love everything you do, and thank you for everything you do because you're a
Thank you.
warrior.
Man, thank you. I do have one more question for you. It's one I'm asking everybody on the show. You get 4 spots. Who's on your Mississippi Mount Rushmore?
Oh, that's easy. That's you and me twice. Oh man, I don't know. Jimmie Rodgers, Elvis. Who'd you help me out here? William Faulkner. I don't know.
I have struggled with my own. I had to do mine because there's really no way to cover it all, right? You're going to end up leaving off B.B. King. You're going to leave off Charlie Pride. I mean, so mine, I did the ones that made my personal story, that were my personal compass. So I got B.B. King and Pops on there. I got you on there and Mac McAnally.
Wow.
But,
Well, I'm honored, but Tammy Wynette, maybe.
Yeah.
I love Tammy. The fact we can claim Tammy Wynette. Jimmie Rodgers for sure.
Yeah.
Elvis, come on, we gotta have Elvis.
Yeah.
Howlin' Wolf's from Mississippi, right?
Howlin' Wolf. That's a good one.
Hard to beat Howlin'.
It's pretty tough to beat.
Arr.
Yep. Thank you, Marty.
Love you, pal.
Love you, man. Mississippi on the Map is made possible by Visit Mississippi. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to be the first to know about new episodes when they drop.